It's either going to be a revenue or a decrease on the expense side of it is what
And
will
is
happen.
debt service considered to be an operating expense?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And that's according to NIFA as well?
Yes. So.
Okay. So now, in terms of the overall budget, you wouldn't see it in the budget, it would just be going into debt service?
It's built into this budget.
It's built into that budget.
It's built into the 2021 budget. We built in $211 million in debt service savings. It's a combination of ways how we did it because there was debt obligations we had outstanding for the county, and then the NIFA piece is through the set-asides, which is a separate area. So, but it's built into this budget in 2021.
But as a result of the restructuring, aren't we deferring debt service expense?
Yes, we are.
So do we actually need the increased debt service flexibility in payments for the 2021 budget?
Yes, we do. We wouldn't be able to balance the budget without that refunding being in there.
What do we pay in debt service presently?
It's,
on an annual basis?
300, I'll give you a ballpark, and it's an estimate. It varies from year to year, 350 to 375, 100 million. That's what it is. 375 million annually we can use as like an
So
average.
assuming 166 is the figure, we would only have 200 million in debt service
I don't have
payments
the,
for
I can get you
2021?
the numbers, but
In other words, are we exhausting whatever we're receiving in premium, assuming that the bonding is approved? Whatever we're receiving in bond premium is going to be paid out in debt service in 2021?
theoretically, yes.
So we're relying upon that to balance the budget in 2021. We're not talking about 22, 23, any of the outlying years.
Correct. We're accounting for it in the outlying years as part of the multi-year plan. It's part of the expenditures that we'll have to incur in the out years.
And
so,
as part of this proposal, if I'm correct in understanding your presentation, is that starting in 2023, we'll be paying an additional $38 million in debt service to pay for what we're planning on restructuring, plus the bond premium, as a result of this borrowing if it's approved.
that's correct.
So do we have any idea as to, I mean, it's not like we have a tremendous amount of flexibility in the budget. Do we have any idea in year 3 or 4 of our 4-year plan as to how we're going to come up with that $38 million?
We have a series of gap closing ideas is what I will say. I mean, there are measures that we do, but, when you create a plan, it's a plan for a reason. We don't know what the world is going to deal us, a hand it's going to be dealt. We came up with a couple ideas. Part of it, would be that, we have a full recovery and the economy comes back, because with every recession, we hope for the V, but hope, we're hoping, but we've accounted for that in the out years of our plan. We've come up with some ideas as to how we're going to plug that hole. A lot of it has to do with economic recovery, and I can't lie to you, we have other ideas on the table. We all constantly looking to better manage, do different things, creative things, how we can do that, how we can save money, how we can, hopefully squeeze a dime out of a nickel. That's what we're always trying to do. But we have accounted for it in the out years. And it's not, look, the plan, it gets us to the point. I'm not going to lie to you, it gets us to that point, but it's the only plan we have right now. It's not like I have, I don't think anybody out there, if the federal government comes tomorrow with a lot of money, hey, listen, we'll take it. I mean, I'm not going to run from it,
Yeah,
But,
I mean, look, I understand that budgets are always a balance between hope and concern.
Sure.
You're trying to strike the right balance to be able to achieve what you're looking to achieve. I do have 2 areas of concern because while it seems as though we've been pessimistic in terms of sales tax revenue, I don't know that we've accounted fully for potential liabilities that we have, particularly in the area of assessment that's been covered. And, I understand that the $30 million figure that you have plugged in for certiorari payments is a carryover of what you had in last year's budget. And I'm a little concerned about the fact that given that we've had more challenges this year than in any other year in our history, and the fact that we have 133,000 SCAR petitions that have been filed, with the SCAR deadline just today having been extended again. Our tax bill's coming out on November 1st, and now the deadline for SCAR is going to be later than the actual deadline for people's bills to go out, which means that when these things are adjudicated or settled, any liability that's incurred by the county is going to be refund liability. It's not something that can be built in to the, to the bills before they go out. You can't make any additional adjustments, so that's going to be an outlay, because of the county guarantee for every dollar in refund, 84 cents is money that the county's never collected, roughly, that the county taxpayers are going to have to pay out. So I'm concerned that, given the unprecedented number of challenges that there are and the status that we're in, that there's been no attempt, I guess, on the budget part, and I know you're deferring the questions to David Moog, but there's been no attempt on the part of OMB to try and calculate some sort of anticipated figure to test whether the $30 million that you have plugged into the budget is in any way a realistic figure. Because what happens if it's 60 million?
Well, but I will say this. So we know that we have 30 million in there, and when we get to the end of the year, and we will figure out what the number is, you know what I mean, that we have potential liability. If it's 10 or 15, I think we have enough money in the budget to do that. But it adds, I hate to say it, but it adds ammunition as to why we really need the debt restructuring. Because I have another, for argument's sake, I have $20 million in additional risk on the cert side, which means if I'm projecting a gap of 380, it's now 400. We could argue what number that could be, but my point is yeah, this is exactly what happens. We don't, if we had money in the bank to pay for these things like fund balance, I could absorb that, but I don't have that anymore. So my point is that there could be some limited risk there. I don't think it's substantial. We've had discussions about it. I can't put my finger on exactly what that number is going to be, but I think we might be able to fit it into the 30. But if it grows higher, that we have to refund class ones, I think it's going to make this debt restructuring a little bit more of a priority at that point too, because my hole is getting bigger. You know what I mean? And I hate to say it, but
I understand that the hole is getting bigger, but it's when we're looking into our crystal ball and you see that you have a large potential problem on the horizon, not really accounting for that in terms of our budgeting is sort of dangerous. It could easily be more than 30 million, and that's my concern. I know it doesn't help our bottom line in terms of the numbers that we're looking at and attempting to try and pass a balanced budget here, but I don't think it's a risk that we can necessarily ignore.
And I don't think we're going to have the facts until, this is the first year of the full reassessment. And, the goal of the administration has always been that we want a fair and defendable role, and I think we're trying to get there. And I think we'll see what happens, because this is the first year of reassessment. We can see what the SCAR liability is. I'm hoping it's good news, because that would limit my exposure on the other side of this, and that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for a fair, defendable role that, as I said to the presiding officer, I'm hoping in a few years from now we're not talking about tax certs anymore. So,
well, I mean, there's a bunch of. I guess my concern is there's a bunch of things that we can hope for, right? I hope that sales tax revenue is double what we think it's going to be. But we're not accounting for that because it may not be realistic. In the same way, when we have this potential liability, the fact that we're not accounting for that, I think it is a cause for potential concern. The other area that I'm concerned about is whether or not we're adequately addressing the labor uncertainty that we have. We have a number of county contracts, municipal employee collective bargaining agreements. There you go. I knew I'd get the word eventually. That are still in the process of being negotiated with many of our major unions. Do you feel as though the money that's been accounted in the budget for 2021 is adequate to address what I hope will be a solution to these outstanding labor contracts? Because it looks like, I don't know what you had plugged in, 26 million, I believe it was? Directly attributable to change in labor cost as a result of the municipal agreements.
And not because we're in current negotiations with many unions, and I don't want to, but we patterned it after one of the unions settling, and that's kind of the pattern we set forward.
So that 26 million is anticipating that we have labor agreements with the remaining unions.
Exactly. It patterns itself after the current.
And the administration believes that the money that's in the budget for 2021 will be adequate to address those additional costs.
Yes, it does.
Okay. No other questions? Thanks.
Legislator Bino? Thank you, Legislator. Hi, good afternoon. Oh, good evening.
Good evening, legislator.
I just have one simple request. You've stated on the record that the reduction to the NICE bus budget would result in lengthier route, or I should say, it would elongate the timeframes between each stop. I'm tired. And this is a marathon for us. We haven't been out so late. That being said, I think this body should have a proposed amended schedule presented to us as we deliberate this budget. I think, I know for me, it'll play a role in how I vote. I need to see what that looks like. And I'd like to see it side by side from what's currently being, what the current schedule is and what is proposed. And when the proposed budget schedule amendments would start. Is that considered to start in January?
It would have to start in January, but let me say this, we will get you the information, we'll get this body the information of what's going
And I
down.
know it's not normally your charge, it probably falls under Commissioner Arnold, but just be aware that I think that, this body's entitled to have that.
And we've worked with DPW. We will get you the information. We do understand that, and there's a lot of public hearings that have to occur when you change routes and everything else that Transdev is obligated to under the FTA rules. So I don't think we've had conversations with them, and I will get you the information. I will get this body the information on what the plan is as far as the lengthening of times for the routes, for certain routes and everything else. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Legislator Birnbaum?
Hi.
Good evening.
Okay, so in the budget items that are decreasing next year, there are two that I just wanted to ask you about. One is parks revenue. I know it's not that huge a number, but what makes that 14% change?
Well, although they're having a bad year, I think, maybe better than we anticipated. We did lose some revenue in cabanas this year because of the pandemic and certain other things. So I think we're being cautiously pessimistic about where we think revenues are going to land in the Parks Department. Golf has been very good because people have stayed at home and everybody wants to get out, and that's the fresh air, But, there are other avenues that we have to be cautious of. And, cabana rentals, you don't know what people are going to want to do. Athletic field rentals, sports teams are starting to regroup, but I don't know what next year is going to look like. So I think we were not overly conservative, but I think the $3 million, is a starting point that we could say this year may be an anomaly, but I don't know how next year is going to look. So.
Okay, and the other question I have is about the state aid. So how confident are you about that it's going to be decreased by that 7.5%?
How confident am I? I'm cautiously optimistic with our esteemed legislators up in Albany that they will not cut our funding any further. It is a big risk. The executive orders that were given to the governor are given the ability to cut funding, 15, 20, 30%. We've started to see some payments withheld, to the magnitude in different areas. There's it varies between agencies. Some agencies have benefited a little bit, but most of them are on the downturn. So I'm as confident as I can be. I've mitigated some of the risk, but there is additional risk out there if they have the ability to cut more from the state budget. So I think what we've taken down to $17 million, I think I'm comfortable with. So I think, we should be okay for next year. But it still could go down, legislator. I cannot tell you that.
Right, and back to the sales tax, I know we've discussed that at length, but have you read national trends about increased consumer savings versus spending and, on service goods rather than services to correlate all this?
We do a lot of analytics here. We have Moody's who came out and told us that, we're going to have growth of 2.66%. We came in at a 1.5. They predicted this year to be down 16.6%. I mean, this is one of those unprecedented times, and that's a term that we use, unprecedented. I think when you looked at the GDP in the second quarter for the first time in my life, I went, wow. I mean, negative was 27 or 30%. I mean, and then couple the unemployment rate, which I think, you know, we're not, I think there's a lot of components in there that are still not filtered into the economy yet. You know, I'm hearing that the airline industry is going to be laying off a lot of people because we all look up in the sky. You know, I sit in my office, I look out my window and I see the jet going by. You see one now, you're getting excited, like, oh, look, people are flying again. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy ahead, and I think, you know, yes, there might be an opportunity, but there also may be risk because of these economic factors that are out there, you know. So we do read a lot. You know, there's a myriad of different ways you can look at it. I do agree that probably people had a lot of pent-up frustration, like sitting in the house. They went out and they were like, oh, let's go shopping, you know. Let's go out, let's, you know, eating. But the other part of this is inflation's taking a big chunk of this, you know. If you look at what you're paying, I mean, everything in the stores have gone up, you know, and that cuts into the consumer spending side and the economic formula, which I'm not the economist, but I can tell you that these factors factor into how people think. You know, they have less money in their pocket because they're spending more on groceries. So I think, you know, they become a little bit more hesitant to spend. So, but it's a wait and see right now. You know, we're speculating like everybody else. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I know that Legislator Rhodes had an additional question, and that's it, right?
I think so.
Okay, I'm sorry, Carrier. Carrier, you haven't gone yet, so why don't you go? You can go, Legislator Salaches.
You're muted.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone, and thank you very much for your presentation. I wish well to everyone and their family. I just have one question. As you may know, as you may recall, Governor Cuomo has ordered that come April 1st, 2021, local governments must submit their plan for reforms in light of sweeping social justice issues and other issues of public safety. I don't see any statement or any information regarding any possible projected budgetary items reflected to reach that goal. Yes, the budget schedule, the presentation schedule does not coincide with that April date. Nevertheless, the budget priorities that you make in your proposals should be reflected for the year going forward. I understand there's a lot of speculation, a lot of uncertainty, but I ask respectfully if there's any information that you could share with us, since it was not mentioned in your initial presentation.
I don't have that information. I would defer that to the police commissioner when he presents on you know, his hearing. I mean, we built the budget around numbers that we know we have expenses to, that, I mean, we're contractually obligated to. There are some savings in overtime in many areas, but I can't say verbatim that we've built in what the governor's proposal has anticipated. So,
but there are various reforms that don't even require action by the police department. I mean, there are various reforms that require or is suggested or encouraged to, for example, address social service issues, and perhaps, you know, by beefing up the number of employees you have or workers you have in the social services. I mean, does your budget reflect any of those issues? I mean, you made mention of various economic issues and how, you know, we must make accommodations to address those issues going forward. Is there anything that you could reflect beyond public safety issues in order to satisfy or help address some of the issues raised by the public mandate coming in April?
well, a couple of things we did do, legislator, now that I look back. We added 6 people in the crime victims unit to address some of these other issues that may be part of the police reform. We put 6 additional bodies there. In addition, we put mental health coordinators in the Health and Human Services area to help with some of these issues that we're addressing. And then the Department of Social Services is a little tougher than that because, they're dealing with, child protective services, Medicaid. They have a list of things I'm going to let the commissioner talk about. But, part of these things are all cause and effect of economic drivers. I hate to say it, but we did build some of that reform, I think, into this. And I think there's some that the police department may have that, they can better elaborate on. But as far as the budget goes, I think we covered some of them. And I don't think it's the full gamut, but I think, there is something in the budget for that.
I'm very glad that you mentioned that it is economically based, and I appreciate that. At the end of the day, we're all the same, and so it's really economics that separates us. And so I really appreciate that. And if you have any further information, I would appreciate that. I also will be emailing a number of questions, hopefully to have a response written in black and white. And I appreciate, again, the administration for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator.
Legislator Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Just to follow up on Legislator Szilagyi's last question, and to clarify, the 6 individuals that you've added to the Office of Crime Victim Advocate, right,
Correct,
which is
yes.
the ones that you're referring to,
Yes.
have nothing to do with police reform. They have to do, the Office of Crime Victim Advocate was created by this legislature. The idea, as in response to cashless bail and criminal justice reform, the idea behind the Office of Crime Victim Advocate is that they're there to act as an advocate on behalf of victims who are now, because of criminal justice reform, required, for example, someone who commits a crime may have that takes place inside someone's home may have access to that home. They may be able to question that individual as a witness, question their family members. The idea behind the Office of Crime Victim Advocate, because the district attorney is there to represent the people of the state of New York, not the victim necessarily, to have somebody who's there to represent the victim so that their rights can be protected, just as the criminal defendant has their attorney to protect their rights, the state has an attorney to protect their rights. The idea behind the Office of Crime Victim Advocate was so that the victim could also have representation, if they so desired, to protect their interests, particularly with respect to the discovery process. So it really doesn't have to do with the police reforms, but I just wanted to make that point. Now, you also mentioned that you're hopeful that our colleagues in the state will not reduce state aid any further. When it comes to sales tax revenue, though, isn't it a fact that the majorities in the state legislature and our governor have already reduced our sales tax revenue as a result of some legislation that they passed just this year? So, for example, they passed legislation to withhold sales tax collections from counties to fund distressed hospitals. So, do you know how much revenue was actually taken? Do they give an accounting? Or do you know how much revenue was actually taken away from Nassau County that's sort of exacerbating our sales tax problem?
Two components that were, we'll say that, I mean, in hindsight would be helpful. With the AIM payment last year, which they took, they give us internet sales tax, and then what happened on the other side of the coin was the towns and local municipalities used to get AIM payments directly from the state. We absorbed that payment through our sales tax collections, which is approximately $11 million. The distressed hospital one came out just recently, which is approximately 7.3 or 7.8 million that they took from us. So in other words, they've haircutted our sales tax by almost $18 million. I'm cautiously optimistic they're going to stop picking our pocket, for lack of a better word, because we don't have a lot of change left in the pocket to pick from. So
Well, I think the problem is neither do they.
well, but, I guess we could have this argument about how we're not getting our fair share from Albany, and, and that's kind of what we could lie
So-
there. But
so
I
to-
think, to answer your question, yes, they are taking additional proceeds of our sales tax for other purposes.
So to be fair, the decrease in our sales tax revenue, certainly COVID is a primary driving factor behind that and the economic shutdown. But Albany is certainly not helping in that they've taken additional $18 million in revenue in 2020. And we would anticipate moving forward that will be more in next year's budget. And I'm assuming that that's counted for in your sales tax projections as well?
You are correct, Legislator.
What do you anticipate being the payments in 2020 for distressed hospital and AIM?
AIM is 11. It's going to be consistently at 11. The distressed hospitals, because of the way we have it calculated, it's, because of the state year, for 2020, it's only about 5.6 or 5.3. In 2021, we have a full year effect, which is around 7.6 or 8. I think that's the number. So
next year, we're anticipating that they're going to take another $18 million
Correct.
in revenue that we should be receiving and redirecting it elsewhere.
I think you summed it up correctly, that they're taking it from us. So.
And incidentally, obviously, it's our merchants that collect the sales tax revenue, but it's Albany that actually receives the sales tax revenue, and then they give us back what they think we're entitled to. Does the state provide us any kind of accounting as to where they develop the numbers that they've developed? How do we know that they're actually giving us what we're supposed to be receiving?
There's many complicated formulas and everything else. They send us a payment schedule, like, you know, what sales tax collection was. And the State Department of Finance has a whole website on what collections were. They have it by county, you know, based on gross sales. There is a method to the madness, is what I will say. So I don't think it's a, you know, black box is what I wouldn't call it.
But it's not something that we can independently corroborate. We rely upon what they tell us.
We kind of check sectors and stuff like that. We try and keep our finger on the pulse of, you know, what's happening, you know. We question a lot. I think every agency here is questioning, you know, sales tax numbers. And, you know, I think if there's a problem, we go right to the state and say, hey, what's going on here? And we get an answer right away. So I don't think we're not on top of it. There's an issue. You know what I mean? We validate a lot of things. So there is an accounting of it, is what I will say. So.
Thank you, Mr. Person.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the legislators? No? I think we're all set. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, legislators.
Frank, before we go to the next, you good deal, okay. So the next presentation will be by the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Greg May, Commissioner, Department of Consumer Affairs. Good evening, legislators. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for letting us be here today. I wanted to take a moment to thank my staff for all of their work during the pandemic. The department did not close during the pandemic. I had staff on rotating schedules coming in, working on license applications, and we had our investigators and our inspectors working in the field throughout the pandemic, issuing violations, tracking down consumer complaints regarding price gouging, and so I wanted to take a moment to publicly thank them for all of their work on behalf of the residents of Nassau County. With that said, the budget is going to be challenging, but we have all of the resources and assets we think we need to get through 2021. And if there are any questions, be happy to take those right now.
I guess I just have a general question in terms of the revenue budget for 2020. Are you on track to meet your revenues for 2020?
We are on track to meet revenues for 2020.
Okay. And then what would you say for 2021? Would you say the revenues will be revenues for 2021 as well?
We were conservative in projecting revenues for 2021. We actually saw a kind of a boost in 2020 because of the pandemic. We issued a lot of violations for the price gouging. I don't know what it's going to look like in 2021. I think, unfortunately, everyone is waiting to see how everything shakes out. We need to see how we are with our licensees. 2021 is going to be the second, the off-year cycle for 2019. So we're not going to know, how many businesses are re-upping their licenses until they re-up their license. And the same thing goes for, issuing violations. It's going to be sort of hit or miss right now. We don't know what to expect.
So, I mean, what is your projection for 2021 as opposed to 2019? Are you projecting a decrease?
I think we had either a slight decrease or we're flat. I think it was about $1.5 million in terms of violations revenue, and then the projections for the licensing, it's the off year, pretty much flat is what we were projecting. Again, I didn't want to I wanted to be conservative in what we were projecting.
Good. Any other questions? Let's set the by now.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Good evening, Commissioner May. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
I'd like to thank you for all of the work that you've done during COVID. I personally had opportunity to reach out to you. You're very responsive and thorough in your investigations. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
One quick question.
Sure.
In reviewing your budget, I didn't see the $100,000 that's supposed to be earmarked for the smart sprinkler system
Right.
in the 2021 budget. What, do you know whether that was put into your budget, or is it?
I think that's going to be a question that OMB has to answer.
Okay, well, I let them get away. I thought I'd specifically asked you if you budgeted for it, since it's,
So we had spoken to OMB about it, so I want to make sure that, they're the ones who give you the answer.
okay, because it's written in the legislation that annually it should be budgeted. And back in 2000, this ordinance was done in 2019, and then in 2020, we amended it for it to come over to Consumer Affairs from the Department of Health. So your budget should reflect that $100,000. I'll follow up with OMB directly.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other legislators? Oh, sure. Legislator Devigy Witt.
Hi, Commissioner. Are you confident that your revenue will be what you want it to be with the, I know you're losing some personnel.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
I know
last
you're
part.
losing some personnel or some employees. Are you worried about that affecting your revenue at all, or?
No, I'm not worried about that affecting revenue. The staff issues are in our licensing division, not in our investigations or in our weights and measures inspectors.
Okay.
Okay, any other legislators? Okay, Legislator Schaefer.
Hi, Commissioner, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Okay. You have in your investigators, is that what was just referenced? Is that are you losing some investigators or no?
No.
You're fine in that department, okay. How many do you have there?
Investigators are, I think the last count was 11 and 6 in the inspectors.
Okay. Okay. And I thought I saw an increase, a salary increase for approximately 20% in that area. Is that correct or no?
So we are getting an additional head in licensing.
Okay.
So I think that's where you're seeing that increase in salary.
Okay. So for the one additional person, that's what that
Correct. It
counts
shouldn't
for?
be 20% for the one person, for salary, but yes, the increase should be for the additional head.
Okay. Okay. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, any other legislators? All right, thank you very much. Greg?
Thank you.
Next, Department of Human Services.
Good evening. So as you can imagine, we've had a really busy year. Human Services has definitely increased. Actually, the need for human services has increased greatly. We're very happy that our budget has remained steady, but we have some of our state funders who have been decreasing, the budgets in some ways. And then on the flip side, the seniors has been giving us stimulus money. So, we're trying to really juggle how we're doing our budgets and, keeping afloat with the services that are needed.
Definitely see that that would be the case in terms of the need for services increasing with the lockdowns and the economic problems and all of the social problems that go along with that. So I think you're probably looking at challenging times into 2021 as well.
Yeah. In terms of youth services, though, we've asked, our the people that we're funding to, sort of reimagine how they're doing things. So we're still able to service the communities the way they need.
And those contracts with the youth service agencies are funded at the same levels in the past?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But again, we're asking them to reimagine how they're doing, what they're doing in order to meet the needs of the folks in the communities. So any other questions?
Sure. Any questions? Yes, Legislator Schaefer.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So just on that same last question and your comment to it, what are some of the ways they've come up with it? Or, you know, I imagine they're doing maybe hopefully Zoom calls with kids, or they're just trying to find ways to occupy the kids with,
Yeah, one of the things we've asked is that they try to develop like educational pods. So for folks that are in the communities that are unable to learn at home because either their parents are not there or they don't have the right equipment, we're asking that the agencies develop a way or a plan to do it at the agency. So either by Zoom or by actually having them come to the agency and be able to learn there.
have there been any other particular issues that you've faced, that you've been, you know, that you've had, I guess, exceptional difficulty
Yeah,
with?
it's early where they're developing new ways to do things. They're working with the school districts to identify folks or gaps in the system. And so it's really early, but we're hoping in the next month or so, people are really settled and they're able to, again, still service the communities in an educational way.
Okay. Thank you.
That's Muley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Good evening. So you talked about, in terms of youth services reimagining, how have you been able to maintain services to senior citizens, given that they've had to maintain, you know, stay in place for the most part, and are probably less able to handle technology? Not all, naturally, but that would be something that would be more difficult for the senior citizens than for, say, school-age kids. So how has that been working for you?
Yeah, mostly with the seniors, it's been about the food and really increasing the Meals on Wheels programs. We've also asked that the senior centers that have not been open, that the staff still stay in touch with the participants that would usually come there. So sort of do sort of well checks on them. Again, reimagine how they would sort of speak to or stay in touch with the seniors. Of course not, you know, we're not asking to do by Zoom, but at least give them a phone call. And then we're also, folks that are delivering the meals, we've asked them to sort of do a spot check, well check, to make sure seniors are okay, you know, as they're delivering the meals, whatever they can see. And then if they see anything, you know, let the senior centers know or the agencies know.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? No? Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank you.
your presentation and your patience. Department of Social Services.
Good evening, Presiding Officer Nicolello and members of the legislature. I want to thank you for having us here to discuss the FY21 budget for the Department of Social Services. I just want to introduce some of these folks behind me, who I work closely with every day in running the department. So we have Brendan Roach is our accounting executive, and then all of these fine women behind me are deputy commissioners: Maria Loria, Sunita Mandrika, and Lorraine Washburn-Brown. So this year has been a, yes. Yeah, can you hear me better? Okay, great.
I think he just wants your name for the record.
Nancy Nunziata. Okay. So this past year has been like no other. COVID-19, an ailing economy, and a high unemployment rate have presented serious challenges to many of our Nassau residents. The, quote, doing more with less was no longer a catchphrase, but a real way of life for many. At the department, we saw the financial impact on so many who had never sought our assistance before. We also saw the impact on our staff, many of whom took ill, several who passed away from COVID-19, and still others who had family members who passed away. DSS staff, like many of our colleagues in this room, are considered essential staff, and as such, we remained open and ready to serve throughout the pandemic. Despite it all, I stand here very, very proud to represent a department that served over 210,000 Nassau residents in 2019. Among some of our accomplishments include processing 81,000 applications for public assistance, Medicaid, and SNAP, responding to over 5,800 Child Protective Service calls, providing daycare services to 5,400 children, sheltering over 1,400 homeless individuals and families. At the height of the pandemic, we processed 3,800 SNAP applications in a month. It was also our 12th consecutive year serving lunches to children through the summer food service program. And this year we served 18,000 lunches using a grab-and-go method due to COVID-19. We also conducted a summer youth program which placed 50 youngsters in work settings in 20 Nassau agencies. In direct response to the COVID-19 crisis, DSS implemented the following measures. The DSS Emergency Housing Unit created an isolation site for homeless Nassau County residents to prevent the spread of COVID-19 through our emergency shelter system and the surrounding community. So far, we have had 70 placements at our isolation site. The DSS Daycare Unit developed a hotline for first responders and essential workers to be able to help them to be able to afford access affordable child care. And DSS also extended our emergency night service operation so that we can assist Nassau County residents after hours. Of course, all of this work had a direct impact on our budget. And with so many uncertainties, we worked very closely with OMB to identify those areas that were of programmatic concern, such as staffing, to ensure the integrity of our operations. OMB recently authorized 8 caseworkers and 2 additional SWEX positions, which has been very helpful to us, and we'll continue to work closely with OMB on future spending. There remains a high demand for our services in Nassau County, with nearly 6% of adults and 8% of children living below the poverty level. Despite these tough budgetary times, we remain committed to strengthening and preserving families by assisting all of those who come to DSS for help. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Just I wanted to thank you, Nancy, and your staff. These were difficult times, and the efforts of your staff and DSS were heroic. So thank you very much for all that you've done. I just have a couple of, I think you covered all that we needed to know. But in terms of assistance, when you talk to the food shelters, they're seeing people that they haven't seen before. So I was wondering if, when you look at some people who are applying for assistance, there's people that you've seen in the past, but are you seeing new and different applicants and that type of stuff?
Oh, sure. Especially for food assistance, that has been the biggest rise was in SNAP assistance, and a number of those people are folks that are recently unemployed, and especially at the point where there was the additional unemployment benefit that helped folks out a bit, but since that dried up, we're seeing again a bit of an uptake in those applications. So food assistance was a big one throughout the past couple of months.
And the other question I had was, you mentioned the CPS numbers of Child Protective Service, 5,800 calls. Have you seen an increase in those calls?
Yeah, we actually are. Maria helped put together some statistics. Things seemed to slow down during the pandemic, but that wasn't real. What slowed down is that people were at home and we didn't have the same sources of reporters. Of course, since school started, we took a look at the numbers. So we're seeing a slow uptick. So between September 1st and September 15th, we received 197 CPS reports. You go then from September 16th to September 30th, it goes up to 275 reports. So we're already beginning to see, now that the kids are back in school, and now that, again, the teachers, which are major reporting source for us, that those numbers are beginning to rise. I don't know if there's anything else, Maria?
No, I mean, it went up 39%.
You're talking.
It went up 39%. Luckily, we were able to really bring our numbers down during the pandemic. I have to say, staff worked very hard. And I know we were all here last February, and our numbers were pretty dreadful. I have to say that we have 65 workers, and only 6 of them have caseloads higher than the recommended number. And more than 40 of them are below the number 12, which is the low end of the recommended number.
You've made progress. That's
It's
good to
really, we've gotten a good place because of COVID. I hate to say it, but now we're going to get really creamed.
Right.
So we're already starting to see it.
The other interesting thing that we're seeing on the protective service side is in adult protective services. We're seeing an uptick in the number of reported APS cases, and interestingly enough, it looks like the majority of those cases seem to be neglect of elders and financial exploitation. We're seeing that as well. So.
Thank you. Let's Walker.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you for you and all your staff, what you did, especially during COVID.
Thank you.
And I know you and I spoke often because I was very concerned about especially our CPS cases and not being able to get those reports from the schools or organizations, youth activities that the kids might go to after school. Now that you have seen an uptake, do you feel that you have sufficient caseworkers to handle that caseload? I mean, I know we were very concerned back when we met before COVID about those numbers, but I hate to see us be put in that same predicament because you still need staffing, especially that you said you lost staff, some staff, and whether they were caseworkers or not, then those people have to be replaced.
Yep.
In your in the department.
Yeah, well, we definitely, the recent addition of the 8 additional caseworkers was helpful. Going forward, and Andy Persick and I have spoken, and we've been meeting with him. He certainly knows that somewhere down the line, we probably will need additional staff, especially if we see those numbers climb. Right now, as Maria stated, it is workable. But we'll have to see where things go. The other thing that we don't know, there's been a number of moratoriums that the state has issued, like, for example, the eviction moratorium. We don't know what's going to happen when that lifts in December. So we're not sure if that's going to drive up our homeless numbers, if it's going to drive up the need for, again, public assistance, food stamps, all of that. So for right now, we are doing okay, and we're really, we have a great team at DSS, and we have staff who are extremely committed to the mission, and so we're doing fine. What is going to happen down the road a couple of months from now? Not really sure. But we're going to be meeting quarterly with OMB. I'm setting up those meetings so that we really can stay in touch and really see how, if we need things to be adjusted moving forward, that we can make those adjustments.
And I know during the summer, the grab-and-go lunches that we had, which was wonderful, and they really weren't limited to people who fell under a certain monetary, amount in their families. You allowed children under 18 to be able to get those grab-and-goes, and I know it benefited many, many families because even some families who were working, essential workers or whatever, and who, what arrangements did they have for the kids to be taken care of, at least they knew the kids were getting, lunch or whatever, and that was wonderful. I know the schools right by me, the kids, sometimes I'd see the kids walking up there with someone and coming home and they were so they were just so thrilled to get, and they'd be so excited to tell me what they were going to have for lunch, you know, as
Absolutely.
they went by. Now, are we doing that, that program has continued now that they're back in school? But it's limited, is it limited? I'm not quite sure if it's
Yeah,
limited to.
I'm gonna turn it over to Sunita, who runs that program. So.
Oh, good evening, everybody. So that's a separate program that comes from SNAP, USDA. The summer lunch program was mostly for summer camps and agencies that run summer programs. But the grab and go that you're referring to, that is through the USDA, that has been extended to December 31st for everybody. So every child under the age of 18, irrespective of if they're eligible for SNAP or not, can now access that free, the lunches in the schools, breakfast and lunches in the school through December 31st. That's through the USDA.
That's separate from the lunch program that they might still have in school where kids could still get, okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Legislator Millet? No, sorry, I thought you did. Oh, Legislator Drucker, I'm sorry. I'm getting punchy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Nancy, thank you for your presentation. I know that your office and my office have been dealing with each other quite a bit recently.
Yeah.
You know, 2020, the beginning of 2020, we saw this horrible, horrible tragedy out in Suffolk County with the young boy who died, and that certainly shook all of us to our core. How has the budget constraints affected your ability to staff your office adequately, especially with respect to hiring more caseworkers so we don't have to have any such tragedies here in Nassau County? I know you mentioned just now you hired 8 additional caseworkers. Do you feel that that is sufficient? Because if I remember correctly, reading, you know, a lot of your caseworkers were really overwhelmed by the number of cases they were handling, and it was quite evident to me and to others that they really needed some help. Do you feel you're able to adequately handle that in view of the budgetary constraints we're all facing?
Well, you know, initially, when that incident happened at the earlier part of the year, we also increased staff at that point. So early on, we brought, I think it was 8 additional. We brought in 8 additional in May, and now we brought in another 8. So in this year, we brought in 16 people, and that has really helped us out. The other thing that we did is Maria and took a look at all of the cases that we had. A number of those cases needed to be closed out. You know, we have a certain period of time in which we have to conduct an investigation, make a determination, and then if it's not an ongoing case, then we need to close it out. So we spent some time reviewing all of the cases that we had, and then closing some out. And then with the addition of staff, that's really helped us to get that caseload down, as Maria mentioned a little while ago.
And you touched on some of the terrible results that we have seen because of the pandemic. And what about your ability now to service the increased number of homeless families and individuals, as well as drug-addicted, alcoholism, and mental illness and depression, which has seen a tremendous uptick since March? Do you feel that, again, with the budgetary constraints, you're able to service these individuals the same way you always have?
Well, you know, shelter space and shelter beds is always a concern, and the availability of it. And now we're coming into the cold weather again, right? So EO 151 will eventually come into play, where we have to shelter anyone who is out there as long as the field temperature is 32 degrees or lower. So we're always looking for additional shelter space. But the other thing that we're doing is, as you know well, we are trying to revamp our shelter system. And the state is going to force us, and every other municipality, to revamp its shelter system, because by January of 2023, every single shelter in New York State must be certified by New York State. As you know, the Jericho project that we've been working on would have been our first for Nassau County, and we are working on several others. So we have again, we have the staff to do the work. We're always looking for the good providers to help us with the space. We continue to see an increase in the number of homeless individuals. That's the number that seems to be on the rise. The family numbers seem to have, would you say, stabled out? Yeah, Lorraine oversees homeless housing, so I'll bring you up for a second. If you could just maybe give some of the numbers that we have.
So right now we're housing 1,230 individuals. That's 670 cases with 778 adults and 452 children. The family number actually declined with COVID. We think that some families opened their doors, maybe a little overcrowding, but they brought their families in. But our singles really skyrocketed. So that's what COVID produced. So we expect that families will rise again as the pandemic eases.
You mentioned, Nancy, that, the moratorium is going to come to an end, probably by the end of the year or January. Are you confident? Can you reassure us that you're going to be able to handle that uptick in homelessness?
It's all going to depend. I have to tell you, it's all going to depend on if we have the beds to put people in as they need it. As you know, what the state said now is that people could be taken to court, and there could be a money judgment against them, but they just can't be evicted through the end of this year. So, we're still scratching our heads saying, well, even if you owe rent since March, and you get a money judgment against you in November, if you didn't have the money in March, how is it that you're having, 6 months worth of rent to pay back? So it's an interesting and difficult situation for people who find themselves in arrears, either with their mortgages or with their rent. And that's one of the things that we are bracing for. So we are now in the process again of trying to see where we can identify additional shelter space. We're talking to providers because we are concerned that come January, if the eviction moratorium is lifted, that there are going to be a lot of people out there in trouble. Now, not everybody, interestingly enough, will qualify for housing. And that's one of the things, lots of people think that when they come to us, they automatically get this service. They don't. There's a lot of eligibility requirements. So there may be people out there who, despite having financial issues with their rent or their mortgages, may not qualify for our temporary housing service. So,
thank you very much, Nancy.
Okay. Are there any other legislators? Legislator Walker.
I know you said there's always a problem with, do you have the beds or whatever. I know for many of us as legislators, there certainly are residents that think like we don't do anything to rid our communities of the homeless, and they write horrible things on social media and so on and so forth. And no matter what you try to say, like we do reach out to social services. We do reach out to if it's by the railroad, MTA police. We do reach out to the towns. We try many times desperately to help the people who are laying by the store or in the gazebo or by the train stations or whatever. But in reality, we don't really have enough places for all of them. Many of them don't want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can't force someone.
Sure.
And oftentimes the sad part is, they leave that train station, but they just pick up their belongings and they go someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them just don't want help. This is the way they want to be, but we really, in reality, we don't have enough places even for them?
Yeah, probably if we engaged every person who right now is sleeping on the street and who would be eligible for our service, we probably would not have enough bed space for every single person. Now, we do have what's called the HIT team, the Homeless Intervention Team, and so when we get calls about clusters of people, like for instance, we just got one this week about a couple of gentlemen in Eisenhower Park, so we're going to send out the HIT team to do an assessment. You know, who are these folks? What kind of services do they need? Is it housing? Maybe it's something else. So we will do that when we've gotten calls from community leaders who've seen clusters in their area. Lorraine just met the last Friday with the folks in Hempstead because they're having a tremendous problem in Hempstead Village, I think it is, yeah, and with a lot of undocumented homeless. So she just met with a group of providers over there last Friday to see what it is that we can do. So, you know, when you're dealing with the homeless, it's really very, very difficult because there's not a one fixed solution. And as you said, there are a number of homeless who may be eligible for our service but are too afraid. They don't want shelter, or quite frankly, they may have been living on the street for so many years that is their way of life. And that's what they know. So, but can I tell you today, if every single homeless person on the street needed to come into shelter, if we had a bed for them, I would probably say no. Couldn't do it.
Just concerns me because, as we said, many who right now are living someplace, but
Yep.
they should have been evicted months ago
Yep.
and weren't. And it's a double-edged sword because certainly you feel bad for the people who aren't receiving any rent because, you know, God knows they could lose what they have because they don't have that money coming in.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just do worry that we could have, you know, a
surge.
much bigger surge. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you know, as Lorraine mentioned, that our family numbers seem to dip during COVID, so we think that maybe family members help take care of family members, but we don't know. Again, you know, when you're couch surfing, you're living in someone's house as a guest. Who knows how long that is going to last? So we may even see some of those folks suddenly show up at our doorstep. So we're not really sure.
Legislator Bino?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening.
So I wanted to talk about the homeless, and you hit on some of the points in addressing Legislator Walker. The situation that I think that's unfolding in Hempstead is really it's surrounding those that are undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know you mentioned, I think you said Section 151 or Code.
EO 151, yeah.
151 is when, based on the weather conditions, you're allowed to house everyone,
right,
regardless of immigrant
Correct.
status. Okay.
Correct.
So, under these conditions, let me ask this: during COVID, was Section 151 enacted, where you were able?
No, we didn't know because it was there were no cold nights and it was mostly the summer. No, we didn't run into that.
Yeah, so there was no.
Yeah, it'll now start happening, you know, as soon as the weather starts getting cold.
I'm surprised that someone didn't issue an executive order. They seem to be flying around all over the place.
Sure.
That would have allowed for us to house people during COVID.
Yeah.
So that being said, you mentioned that you were out in Hempstead and that you met with folks there, and I know that there's a group of people who have been doing an extraordinary work making sure that folks had food and clothing and the like. That was brought to my attention recently. So what can we do in cases where we're finding clusters of homeless individuals who aren't documented? Are there other groups that could step in? Is there any, spiritual churches or anybody who's able to step in and provide some level of care that's not using government funding?
Let me actually think, Lorraine, if you could just talk a little bit about what we're trying to do, what we think we may be able to do. What clearly we can't do is through DSS is house people who are undocumented.
That's right, I understand that.
So we can't do that, but maybe.
So, I'm not going to speak for another department, but there are monies coming in through different block grants, and we are looking, partnering with those block grants to see if there are alternatives to Department of Social Services, because there are cases where people are sanctioned at DSS and they can't enter shelter. There's many reasons why we might need alternate housing, not just for undocumented. So we are exploring that. For the COVID, when you asked, we did ask, a lot of people asked if the EO 151 could extend to the pandemic, but they didn't choose to do that at the state level.
Okay. So, in terms of those that would become homeless by way of eviction, potentially December 31st, which probably will get extended again. You mentioned CARES Act money, and I know that the Department of Housing stated earlier during our committee session that they were using some of their CARES Act money to assist families that were required to move during COVID by way of paying their security deposit. Are we in discussions with that department and maybe any other department that might have COVID money, including Human Services, how we might be able to use that money to stabilize those families that might become homeless?
I think one of the things that the plan is to work with the housing office of the community development. Yeah, I mean, we are definitely in discussion to see how the different streams of money might be able to help some of these folks. Because again, as I stated earlier, not everyone who gets evicted might be eligible for our service.
I do understand that.
So we're trying to, there's a lot of out-of-box thinking going on in preparation for what might happen at the beginning of the year.
Okay. And when you say temporary housing or assistance, you're talking about the ESG program?
Yeah, we're talking about ESG and a couple of other the funding streams that come through that the Community Development Office would have access to. We would not, so that there might be a way to use some of those funding streams.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Legislator Schaefer.
Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. I just have a few questions about some of the positions and the changes in salaries that I noticed. Just to clarify for myself. The Attorney 2 position I saw there was like you have a staff of 2 that are under that title, if you know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The Attorney 2 position. So you have from what I could tell, you have a staff of 2 people under that position? Okay. And I noticed there was an increase of about 19% in, I guess, salary or in your budget, essentially. So I was just wondering what that accounts for. Is it just a salary increase? Is it something else?
I believe it was for something else. OMB added that.
Okay.
OMB added that additional funding.
They did.
So I
okay.
believe they have that earmarked possibly for the union contracts.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Okay. There was also, if you know, there was an increase in terminal leave expenses. Are there retirements that you know that are coming up, or
Plenty,
there are? Okay.
Plenty of them.
Plenty.
Terminal leave we usually budget based on the prior year, and it always seems to be going up, so that's why we increase terminal leave.
Okay, and it sounds like you're pretty confident.
Oh, and actually, we talk about it at work a lot. I don't know how many retirements we've had, how many notices of retirements we've had since the beginning of COVID. I could think of at least probably 10 off the top of my head, and we have several more. And we think what happened is, we have plenty of people at DSS who've been there a very long time. And I think COVID has forced lots of folks to think about their life and what they want to do, and so a number of people have put in their paperwork. So we have more coming, right? I think there's another at least 4 or 5 through the end of the year. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Also, and maybe this is another OMB issue, but I also noticed something in Social Welfare Examiner 1 position. that there's a staffing level of 17, and the change was it was about a 12.5% increase in that. Is that something that?
That's another
contracts?
OMB. Yep.
Okay. These are like CSEA?
Yep.
Union contract positions.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, so that's probably accounts for a couple of the others I was going to ask about. Okay. Federal and state aid reimbursement, have you seen changes already, or are you just anticipating a lot going forward, or you haven't seen anything?
We haven't seen anything.
That's
And,
good.
there's lots of advocacy going on because many departments of social services throughout the state are worried. But the state is also in bad shape. They keep saying, we'll get to it, but nothing yet has come.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any other legislators? Okay, all right, I think we're done. Thank you all.
All right, thank you very
Yes,
much.
Appreciate it. Next up is the Department of Assessment. Hello, Mr. Moog. Mr. Miles, welcome back.
Mine's on. There we go. Okay. Cool.
Ready? Okay. Good evening, legislators. I'm David Moog, County Assessor. I'm with Robert Miles, Deputy Assessor at the Department of Assessment. Just want to give you a brief overview of the 2021 budget for our department. With the COVID pandemic, our budget at DOA was appropriately altered to help the realities of the fiscal restraints imposed by the decrease in tax revenues. We reviewed the operating expenses with the budget office and agreed with the reductions by the proposed budget, and we are confident that the DOA's current staff will be able to manage the issuing a new assessment roll for 22-23 that will be accurate and fair. We are also confident that in the coming year we'll be able to meet our tasks. The department, fortunately, has consolidated functions of 5 different assessing titles into the Assistant County Assessor title, allowing the department more flexibility in assigning staff and gaining substantial amount of productivity. We've also been working with the IT department in creating applications that allow a better tracking of our processing and analysis assignments, which also increase productivity. Although our headcount was cut, we understand the fiscal needs of the county due to COVID. If given the opportunity of recovery of revenue, we would gladly work with OMB in hiring more personnel. Adjustments to the revenue were made considering the changed real estate due to COVID. We'll be working closely with the budget office on the tracking and changes of the revenue streams over the next year. I know that the coming year will be one of challenges, and the Department of Assessment is ready to meet those challenges. Thank you, and I'll be ready to answer your questions.
Anyone have any questions? Mr. Rhodes, Mr. Reddy?
Good evening, Mr. Moog, and thank you for being here.
Good evening.
And we appreciate your report. The 2021 proposed budget eliminates 49 positions that continue to be vacant from the Department of Assessment.
That is correct.
Earlier today, we were asked to consider 2 contracts for Haberman and SVS to provide assistance with modeling and to provide assistance with training of assessment staff. Is there any correlation between those 2 things?
The SVS and Haberman contracts in assisting in the modeling is to assist in giving expert information to the current real estate market in Nassau County. The Department of Assessment, all our income and expense analysis would be based on income and expense filed in 2019. So in engaging mainly Haberman Associates, we'd be getting more up-to-date leases in the current year, which wouldn't be available to our current database. On the SVS side, we expect to try to get expert analysis from them concerning up-to-date analysis on sales of real estate, since sales usually lag 3 to 6 months from the county clerk's office. With the ever-changing market with COVID, we wanted to get the most up-to-date information from probably the two best experts in the county to provide that information. So the expertise in the modeling is not that they're doing the modeling, it's that they're giving us advice in order to try to get the most up-to-date data so that we can take account the very, very quickly changing market that evolved from the COVID crisis.
So the answer is no, that there's no correlation
That's the
between the
short answer.
contract and the employees.
Right.
My concern, which I expressed to Mr. Miles earlier, was the fact that back in I guess 2017 or 2018, when we approved 2017, I believe, when we approved the extension to the Haberman and SVS contracts, it was with the idea that we eventually would not need them. When we approved those initial contracts, the idea was that they would come in, they would get us set up, they would train us on how to use it, and then we would go with our own people.
That is true.
That has not, it doesn't seem as though that has come to pass. One, you've never been given the opportunity to be able to fully staff your office. And now it appears as though with the elimination of 49 vacant positions, those are positions that I assume there's a need for, that for budgetary reasons, those positions are being eliminated. Correct?
That is true.
So you could use those additional 49 people.
Eventually, we could use them, but we also understand the current crisis with the budget, that we were willing to forego those lines for the time being, and hopefully, as the economy recovers, to try to get those people hired. But let me just also clarify that we have been training in-house modelers. It's the expertise being provided by Haberman and by SVS is related to the changes in the market due to COVID. And those changes have been very dramatic and very quick. And again, our office doesn't have the information available to them for the 2020 year. Recent leases, changes of vacancy, how leases are being renegotiated, none of that information will be coming to our office until April of next year, after the tax rolls have already been issued.
If you could just explain to Mr. Moog, why is that? Why does Haberman and Associates and SVS have access to information that our Department of Assessment doesn't have?
Because they know more current leases that are just being signed, and sometimes that information is not reflected in the ASIE until the following year.
Right.
So our information is, for the commercial side, comes from the ASIEs that are filed, and that's filed for fiscal year 2019 for all the firms that file. They file in April by April 2020, but they're filing information that's actually already 4 or 5 months old. Since COVID occurred in March, you know, and I know, we all know, the dramatic change in the retail market, in the hotel trades, in all sorts of office market has changed dramatically. And we know leases have been renegotiated, we know vacancy factors have changed, but we wouldn't see the reflection of that until April of next year, after the tax roll closes.
Well, I guess perhaps the better question is,
Sure.
how do they get faster access to that information? In other words, what do they use to obtain that information that we're not?
Well, some of them because they're doing appraisals and they're helping renegotiate leases themselves, and they have access to brokers' information that we don't have information to, we don't get access to. So they're working with the private sector, with these brokerage firms. Some of them are doing refinancing of different mortgages, so they have to refinance and look at the new income streams. So they have more up-to-date information for the current year that, like I said, we will not receive until next year.
We rely heavily on the residential end on recorded deeds and sales, and then on the commercial end, we have to rely on the ASIEs. And I don't see a solution to the ASIEs because they must file every year based on when they file their taxes. We do use something like a Cushman Wakefield. We use CoStar, and we do use regional data. But as we mentioned before when we were having this discussion earlier in the day, it is necessary to have the outside expertise to know a little bit more in real time what's happening on the ground. And just one more thing I just wanted to add to what the assessor was saying. Not only is the expertise regarding COVID-related assessments from SVS and Haberman crucial, we don't have staff members who are able to train other staff members the way we would if we didn't have these contracts. So we'll be using the Haberman contract, as we were discussing earlier, to get as many individuals as we can to get the New York State assessor certification, and we'll be relying on the SVS contract to further train the modeling staff, which, you know, we said before was doing an excellent job, and we're moving forward, and they're doing phenomenal. It's just trying to beef up their appraisal knowledge. They're great statisticians, and we just want to make sure they continue to excel and become the great modelers that we actually foresee them being.
And also, just one other note on the training side from Haberman's side, that certification process enables in-house staff to advance in their own careers, become certified assessors. It's a career line. The career line runs from Assessor Grade 1 to Assessor Grade 2, Assistant County Assessor Trainee, then you become an Assistant County Assessor. Then you can't go any further until you get enough classes, take enough classes to get certified as IAO. Then you can take the Certified Assessor 1 and Certified Assessor 2 test. So it's also crucial for the in-house staff to get this training to further take the ability to take other civil service tests and move up in their career.
And you go from a grade 10 to a grade 13 and a grade
16.
So it's
so the
substantial
union is very
career.
interested in making sure their own staff has the ability to grow within the job.
I guess I understand the piece about COVID. Obviously, circumstances have changed. They changed very quickly, and they've changed in a very dramatic fashion, and I can understand why it is that you might need an outside firm to provide you with much more recent information than we would have access to based upon their particular knowledge and expertise. I get that.
Yeah.
The second part. The second.
Now the
part,
mouthful real quick. So thank you.
the second part of that, however, it is really the part that I'm struggling with, which is that all of this training and bringing our employees up to speed and getting them the certifications that they need was something that was supposed to be part of that original contract. Now, I understand that you've brought some additional people on board, but why
Not the training.
Wait. Why wasn't the first thing that we did sort of train the trainers so that they could turn around and new people that were brought on board, we could give them the training? I thought that was the plan.
The training that was in the original contract was the training for the statisticians. That's still ongoing with Russ Timmigan doing the training for the statisticians. And some of the work that's actually been completed, because some of them actually assisted in the SCAR mediation process and assisting Robert Miles' team in doing mediation. They're basically modeling and statistics side. This training is training that's is specific to classes that are given by the New York State Assessors Association and also by ORPS. Fortunately, ORPS classes are free of charge. The New York State Assessors Association has a fee charge to it. If they take, I think it's 7 classes through the regulations as set forth by ORPS, that qualifies them to take the certified test. Right. So we need to have someone who actually has the ability to contract with the New York State Assessors Association to keep track of those classes and also do some of the training himself. And one of the people at Haberman, Tom Donato, is actually also a certified trainer with the New York State Assessors Association. It's not something that's easily acquired. You have to go through a considerable amount of training with the New York State Assessors Association. I've gone through quite a bit of training, but I'm actually not a certified trainer with the New York State Assessors Association. I'm a certified assessor, but not a trainer. So that's why we felt it was crucial to try to get that going with the in-house staff, because they were very anxious to try to be able to take the IAO. To that point, we've had a number of people, actually 2 people just passed what they call the IAO recently, 2 of our staff members, and another dozen or so will be taking the test in November, some of them which already passed one part of the test, and they hope to pass the second part. And they took that initiative on their own. The only thing the department provided for was administrative leave to take the test. So I'm very proud that the on staff is also jumping ahead and just trying to get certified on their own, using their own money, paying for their own classes, and paying for the test. So that's also another route people are taking, and those people, I have to commend them for being aggressive about their careers. And only 7 people passed the test this past cycle, 2 of them which were in Nassau County.
And the best path moving forward is using a certified trainer, because although we're proud of the individuals who did take the test and pass the first part, you want to make sure that you give that, give other people the chance to not just rely on their own initiative, but to have a certified New York State trainer to get them to become certified and move along in their career path, which is what Mr. Moog came in and did, which is one of your objectives when you came in, when you did the combination of the assessments, the
Yes.
assessor titles.
Yes, that's a time, right.
Okay. So the loss of the 49 positions, we can certainly agree will have an impact on the operations of your office. No question about that.
No
correct?
question about that.
Now, separate and apart from the 49 vacant positions, are there still vacant but funded positions within your department?
We're presently in the process of hiring 2 people in the tax map unit. We had a little bit of money left, so we decided to hire 2 tax mapper 1 title people. The surveyor's unit was very thin in its staffing, and also we felt it was an opportune time to try to recruit, because usually it's a hard to recruit title. It usually pays very well, but now with the current recession with high unemployment, we got a large number of qualified resumes on that, and we decided to try to pursue those 2 positions. We want to expand the mapping unit because they use GIS, and we feel it's a crucial tool with the modeling and with Esri. So I think those titles, they start like $28,000 a piece. We've now, right in the process of sorting through the resumes, I think we received about 15, 16 resumes from Indeed, and we hope to be able to hire 2 people on those lines. Those are the 2 lines, and then one other position, I think, is a person transferring from the county attorney over to the Department of Assessment. And that's the
So-
only lines we already have funded.
Once those 3 individuals are hired,
Right.
you will be at full staffing based on the 2021 proposed budget.
Yes, unless people retire, and if people retire, that would open up funding, and as you know, people usually retire at higher salaries, and the people we could hire, we could probably, take those funds and hire numerous lower salary people to keep the funding going. So I know of several people who are on the path towards retirement, and I believe over the next, 5, 6 months, we'll probably see 2 or 3 people retire, and from that, probably liquidate those lines and turn those lines over for hiring new people. So I'm hoping that if that occurs, we'll be hiring 5, 6, 8 more people before April, if these retirements come about.
So now, you've obviously been our assessor now for a couple.
For
just
2
shy of
years
2 years,
and
right?
3 months?
2
Yes.
years and 3 months? So obviously, you have a good working knowledge of the county's assessment department. The part of the overall strategy in doing the reassessment was that we were going to beef up the numbers of assessment staff, as we spoke about, so that we
Yes.
would be able to perform all of these tasks on our own, in-house, and we would have a fair and accurate role and be able to reproduce that role every single year.
Yes.
In what ways will the loss of 49 positions make it more difficult for you to do your job?
Well, it will postpone some of the initiatives that we were moving forward on. And so we were, vigorously training new people for residential field and commercial field. I had a plan going forward that once we had the staff large enough to actually start cross-training residential people with commercial with residential, and eventually break the county into a series of assessment districts. And the people working in those districts would do both commercial and residential, because the title I created can do both sides, where before they were always separated commercial people from residential people. And I felt by that we'd have a greater sense of control and quality control of assessments being done. We could also probably zero in on different areas and be able to really dig deeper into trends that are going on in particular, especially on the commercial side. With that being said, that plan will probably just be postponed until more staff comes aboard. We'll probably keep continuing the organization of the office as it is, but in the future, we hope to do that. One of the benefits of the new title, the Assistant County Assessor title, is that we had people who were hired in the SCAR unit, and now we have them, when the SCAR season's done, although the SCAR season's a little longer this year, we could pivot them to exemptions, we could pivot them to residential, we could pivot them to commercial. And it gave a much higher degree of productivity where people didn't have as much downtime. Same could be said in residential, where we needed people in SCAR, we pivoted people out of residential and commercial into SCAR. So it enables us to be much more nimble in moving our personnel around when needed on a very quick basis. So, but long-term, like I said, that was some of the long-term plans to try to create a more district-level setup rather than having it compartmentalized between commercial and residential. And that'll probably be put off for a year until we get more staff coming in.
How will it impact your ability to produce or how will it make it more difficult for you to be able to produce an accurate roll on an annual basis without those employees?
Well, this year we plan to have another trended roll, and we'll probably evaluate next year what we'll be doing. And because of the reduction in headcount, we might resort to doing a trended roll next year and put off till the following year to do a full reassessment roll. So that's probably where the real impact is, that instead of doing a reassessment roll next year, we'll probably put it off to the following year because of the cut in staff at the time.
So
and also and COVID, because you have to still,
Right.
you know, it's still, like I said earlier in the
It's
day.
a market in flux, so
ebb and
it'd be
flow.
very hard to model with the COVID numbers coming in because it's a lot of
And a trended,
quick changes in the numbers that really it's hard to absorb.
and so I understand a trended roll obviously is less accurate than a full reassessment.
Yes, it's acceptable, but it's less accurate, yes.
So, for example, back in, for the 2021 roll, which we're sort of in the process of still completing now, we can argue whether or not it's accurate, but it was a full reassessment.
Yes, it was.
So that theoretically would be the most accurate roll. Last year, we did a trended roll.
Right.
Which is less accurate with the staffing.
Although the numbers showed that was also a very accurate roll because we incorporated a lot of the changes from ARC, and it actually worked out very well on that roll.
Well, again,
This coming year, the problem is with COVID, it'd be very tough to model to begin with because the values are changing so quickly, and you have some areas in the North Shore increasing by 9%. Overall in the county, they're increasing 6%. And when you do a model, usually you take 3-4 years of sales. Now, all of a sudden, you inject into those 3-4 years of sales a jump, and we don't know how substantial that jump is going to stay, or is it going to pull back next year? So it becomes a little tougher to model on that end. So I will say the 21-22 roll was actually a very accurate roll just because we incorporated a lot of the changes made by ARC, which actually fine-tuned a lot of the values and then trended from there. So it actually is a very good roll. But you are correct that over time, you should do a reassessment on a regular basis. And if we didn't have to cut in staff, we'd probably be doing it sooner. And we want to be doing it a little later. It also coincides with the instability of the COVID year.
Well, have you received any indication from, well, you're part of the administration, but have you received any indication from central administration as to when they anticipate being able to get you back to the full staffing that you need to be able to produce a reassessment?
I think that all depends on many factors that probably Andy Persich knows more of, but it really depends on recovery of revenue from sales tax. It also depends on if an aid package comes from Washington and a stimulus. It depends on who's president in the next year, if it's going to be more generous to help fund local government or not. So there's a lot of unknowns there. I would believe if aid did come from Washington and more monies came in from Washington to better fund local government, we would definitely work with OMB to turn around and start hiring again, as long as we feel the revenues were stable enough to hold that. We wouldn't want to hire people to get them laid off, of course, but we would work with OMB to try ramp up the hiring once again. Now, a lot of the hiring in those titles I just mentioned is probably a little stunted until the civil service test is given. We can't hire provisionally while there's a test list, not test list, but a test announced. Once the test is announced, you can't hire provisionally. All the tests were actually postponed because of COVID. They were supposed to be given in April, and they've been postponed until further notice. So that might also put a little delay on the hiring because the titles we want to hire in, we just can't hire provisionally in. It's just that it's an impossibility until the test is given. So there's some also mechanisms you have to work into civil service, and that's always been the problem I had since I've been here. We hire provisionally, it triggers a test. Once a test is announced, you can't hire provisionally. You have to wait for the test is promulgated, list comes out, you exhaust the list, then you get like a 2-month period to hire provisionally, and then the cycle starts over again. So it's a little tough on that end because of the civil service side. It's just the nature of the civil service law.
Sure. Since we have you here, and obviously the 2021 role has been a topic of conversation. Can you give us just a brief overview? How many grievances were received as a result of the county executive's reassessment?
How many petitions filed?
How many petitions filed? How many grievances were resolved at ARC? How
With
many SCAR
the,
petitions were filed? Just,
there were 80,000 petitions filed, and the filing period ended September 4th.
that's SCAR petitions, right?
SCAR petitions.
Petitions.
SCAR
How many-
petitions.
How many grievances in total, do you know?
Well, you're talking about SCAR petitions, or you're talking about ARC grievances?
Well, I wanted to get, starting from the start of the process, how many ARC petitions were filed?
Okay, for 2021 or 21-22?
2021.
Oh, I have 21-22 ARC numbers.
2021 should be about 250,000.
Okay.
About 250,000.
And how many grievances were resolved at ARC?
Approximately 60,000?
Yeah.
All right, so you had 190,000 that were still out there?
No, that's not anymore.
Well, no.
No.
When ARC finishes, about 190,000, but then
Yes, okay.
80,000 SCAR petitions were filed.
Right.
Okay.
And SCAR petition deadline was September 4th this year. It started in May 26th. And normally, you know, it's April 1st to April 30th.
Right.
From May 26th to July 1st, 28,000 petitions were filed, 29,000, and then 50,000 were filed from July 1st to September 4th. Of those 50,000, 58,000 were settled in mediation, and 8,200 were resolved in court hearings, SCAR hearings. The remaining cases it's 13,408 cases remain after the close of the filing period and the closing of the ADAPT system, meaning that it's finished up, the tax roll is being calculated with 13,408 cases outstanding.
And the governor just extended the SCAR deadline again.
No,
No, he did not.
Not the SCAR
Not
deadline.
the SCAR deadline.
The tax are deadlines. But the
not
SCAR
SCAR.
Okay,
deadline,
not the SCAR filing deadline.
Correct,
So
correct.
the 13,800, I think you said.
13,408 is the set number.
That's the set number.
Of
So-
that, ones that went to mediation, the 58,000 to mediation, the median percentage decrease was 3%. And also 14,281 of those cases were settled with zero offer. They basically withdrew the case on the mediation side.
25% of cases accepted a no offer.
So how many, ultimately, whether it was by settlement or by adjudication in a SCAR hearing, how many petitions were granted?
When you were granted?
Well, all right, it's inartful phrasing. Between settlements that resulted in a change in someone's assessment and cases that were adjudicated favorably upon the petitioner, for the petitioner, how many are we talking about?
I mean, how many received reductions in mediation or petition? How many were confirmed?
A much simpler way to say that, yes.
Okay. Do you have that number, Robert?
How many people were successful?
He was running about 55%.
Doing quick math in my head right now. Between 38,000 and 40,000.
So out of the 80,000, roughly half.
Right. And of the
Have got-
mediation, the median decrease percentage was about 3%.
Okay.
Right.
And obviously, to make up for that, because they occurred before the roll went final, there's been an adjustment to the rest of the roll to balance everything out.
Correct.
Yeah, if the good thing that happened this year was, usually we get all of the court's decisions in by August 5th. We told the administration that is cutting everything close because the tax warrants, as you know, are supposed to be submitted in September. And
next month.
the deadline going to September 4th was precarious at best.
Right.
And then receiving the executive order, we were able to include more cases in court and mediate many more cases.
So now, because of the fact that we've had now an additional 40,000 adjustments to the roll, out of a total number of Class 1 properties of somewhere in the area of around 390,000?
About 384,000, right.
384,000?
Right.
For the 2021 year, using trending to develop the 21-22 roll,
Correct.
now with a reduction of 49 positions that you'll now not be able to fill, may result in the 22-23 roll
Right.
also being trended.
Correct.
And we'll have to wait and see whether those positions ever come back for future years.
All depends on the budgetary considerations.
Of course.
That's a,
Of course.
it's
Are
a
you
big mystery for everybody, I think.
Yep. Are you concerned that while the goal was to have the most accurate roll possible, that staffing, having to do trending models as a result of staffing, and with issues that are now being resolved with respect to the initial 2021 roll, that we might be something less than the most accurate roll possible moving forward?
I do believe it'll still be a very, very accurate roll, and compared to all the jurisdictions in New York State, it's still one of the most accurate rolls in the entire state, even with the 21-22 roll being trended. And I do believe the 22-23 roll will also fall into that category of being one of the most accurate rolls in the state, even though we're using a trended method.
Especially considering when the median percent decrease in reduction was 3%.
But we actually won't know with respect to the, and respectfully, with respect to the 21-22 roll and 22-23 roll, we still won't know how accurate the roll is until everything's been adjudicated.
Well, if you're starting out with a highly accurate roll, and that's the fundamentals of your 22 and 23 rolls,
And
it's going to be an accurate roll.
And that's also one of the reasons why we want to do the Haberman SVS contract, in order to try to get that roll as accurate as possible with the changes in the COVID
So we need
market.
the outside help. So essentially, when I asked if the need to have Haberman and SVS is in some way related to the fact that you're not up to full staffing, the truthful answer to that question is it may not be the entire reason, but it's part of the reason. Would that be fair to say?
No, I'd say more of the reason is because of COVID. And the COVID market is so difficult to be able to model and able to even trend. Even people like Goldman Sachs saying they really have no idea where the real estate market is going. When Goldman Sachs doesn't know where the market's going, that's a troubling situation. So we wanted to make sure we get as much expertise on our side to try to get a trend as close as possible.
You can have
going forward.
250 people in the department. Doesn't mean that any of them are on the outside doing appraisals, picking up leases, rents, mortgages. We can have a staff of 300. It doesn't mean that we don't have anyone on the outside who's been dealing with the swings of the market for the past few months.
It's really an unprecedented time in the real estate market, and we wanted to make sure we have as much knowledge and background going forward, and that's why we felt it was crucial for those contracts.
But we have an exceptional staff now, and thank you for the contracts. We're going to continue to train them, certify them, and continue to develop excellent roles for this county.
And by the way, by my questions, I don't intend any slight or discredit to any of the Department of Assessment staff that you have. I mean, I know that they're working hard, but there are fewer of them than there should be for you to be able to do your job to its optimum level.
And we understand that, and we understand that this is an unprecedented time with the budget. I mean, this is, once in a 100-year pandemic, hopefully.
Right.
And it's I think to the credit of the administration and credit of a lot of government officials around the country trying to deal with the budgets. It's
Right.
not just Nassau County, it's something that's coming across the entire country. And New York State and New York City and the metropolitan area have suffered greatly under the COVID crisis.
And we're just expressing pride of the staff of assessment, and ARC has been of great help, and the county attorney has also been of great help. So
I mean, what I also will say is that when we did these scars, it was the first time we had to do them by Zoom, in remote, with the court system.
Right.
And you're talking about going from phase 4 was only in June. We only started doing hearings in June because that's when the court finally opened up.
Right.
It was a really monumental effort by the staff to get this work done in such a short time. And
If I can.
and it was
if I-
really remarkable that it was completed as,
And the
as well
court
as it
worked
was.
admirably as well.
If I can ask, of the 13,800 petitions that are still remain to be decided,
Right.
what are we talking about in terms of a total dollar value change? What would that represent?
We're not sure because a lot of these cases already received mediation. Every case that came across, 99% of the cases that was filed petitions had mediation. Many of these cases had either no offer made or an offer that wasn't acceptable by the taxpayer or the tax rep firm.
But doesn't the process start with, like, when I grieve my assessment, learn not to say grieve my taxes, when I grieve my assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I,
You're catching on.
When I grieve my assessment, I list what I believe the market value of my house is supposed to be on that initial application.
Right.
Yes.
Versus what the assessed value of my house is.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
You should be able to calculate, based on those two different numbers, right, what we're talking about in terms of total potential exposure to the county. So, for example, we have $30 million in this year's proposed budget that's supposed to handle residential and some portion of commercial potential certiorari liability. On the residential end for the Class 1 properties, that represents now the 13.8 that haven't been incorporated within the roll by the time it went final. What is our potential exposure?
That we have not calculated, and that's a very hypothetical number to calculate because, first of all, like I said, all these cases went through mediation, so a lot of them received no offer to begin with, in our opinion, would receive no offer further down the line. These cases will be rigorously defended by our staff, just like all the prior cases were, and they'll probably be adjudicated over the next months until probably late January, early February, at the schedule that the court is setting for us on that, because their staff is also swinging back to doing other judicial work. They pulled attorneys off the floor and assigned them these cases, and now those attorneys have to go back to their regular duties at the court. That being said, also, I feel a lot of the cases that are being adjudicated now also were cases that were filed later in the season. Some of them were, and it was, I don't know how much merit those cases have. So it would be hard to take the prior reductions being granted and seeing how those prior reductions would apply. But looking at a median decrease of 3%, which is a pretty small decrease overall, I think the liability shouldn't be that great, but I really can't put an exact number on it.
And
Well,
it's tough. I'm sorry,
I was going to ask, do we know whether these are higher value properties or lower value properties that remain outstanding, or is it a mixed bag of everything?
I think it's a mixed bag. The higher value properties tended to file earlier, and I think a lot of them did get resolved just because of the early filing of them, because they also, even they didn't get resolved with mediation, they also got resolved through the court doing hearings, because they had more chance of getting a hearing if you filed earlier. And the higher value ones, I think the tax rep firms made sure they were filed very early on. So if they got through Robert Miles' SCAR mediation, they weren't satisfied, they were more likely to get hearings at SCAR just because it was first in, first out.
Yes.
And so I don't think the higher value cases really make up a big percentage of the 13,400, only because of the nature of how tax reps file for their cases.
Yes.
So
I would just ask Legislator Rhodes if you could finish up.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Just with respect to Class 1 residential grievances, would we be able to obtain a spreadsheet detailing the address, the assessed value, the grievance value, and any reduction that are granted, number of cases that are still outstanding, and what types of cases those are?
Talking about the grievances or the petitions, Legislator? I'm sorry.
The total number, we wanted a spreadsheet detailing with respect to the SCAR petitions, the ones that have been.
Okay.
The remaining 13?
13,400?
No, in other words, you started from 80, right?
Yes.
So we wanted to know what the addresses are, what the assessed value was, the grievance value, what it was settled at, or what it was adjudicated to.
Mm-hmm.
Can we get a spreadsheet for all of those cases?
Yeah, we'll try to pull that from the ADAPT system.
Thank you.
Legislator Ferretti was next.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I'll be, I think, pretty short. Just a few questions. Legislator Rhodes hit on a lot of the questions that I had. The tax map verification fee. There's a $6.9 million reduction in the projected revenue from that. My understanding is that that's, I think you had indicated that was due to a possible reduction if the court was to award a reduction in the amount of the fee. Is that correct?
Those calculations are handled by the budget office in conjunction with the county attorney.
Yeah, I don't think you got that information from this department.
You got that from Andy Kirsch's side.
Okay.
I believe Andy did take a look and consulted with the county attorney on those figures and came up with a calculation on the current filings made at the county clerk's office and took a percentage based on possible loss from the litigation further on down the line. But that was all them conversations between budget and county attorney.
My recollection is I don't think there was the issue with the application of the fee itself. I thought it was the pricing of the fee.
Well, that's kind of where I was going with my question, in that I agree with you, that's what Mr. Persick had indicated. And
Okay.
So working under the assumption that the fee has to be, there must be a nexus between the fee and the service provided. Did your office have any consultation with either the county attorney's office or Mr. Persick to explain exactly what the service is, so they can get an idea as to what?
Oh, yeah, county attorney, we've talked to county attorney a lot about what the services were, just because of the nature of the litigation and what the process is administratively. So county attorney and budget are aware of the administrative process. I don't think it really had to do with a dip or increase in the amount of tax map verification letters going out. I think it solely had to do with the results of the litigation or the progress of the litigation.
So did your office come up with the $6.9 million number, or was that Mr. Persick came up with his office?
That was Mr. Persick.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into all the questions that Legislator Rhodes got into. I just want to make sure I have the numbers down correctly, and then I just have a few questions.
Sure.
So total grievances for 2021, 250,000, correct?
Grievances, yeah.
Right. And then about approximately 60,000 of those were settled at ARC, is that correct?
That's my recollection, yeah.
All right. 80,000 SCAR petitions, correct?
Yes.
That is correct.
Approximately 50,000 were settled in mediation?
58,000 through mediation and another 8,200 through decisions.
Right.
So I'm sorry, 58,000 through mediation?
58,000 were resolved through mediation, and 8,200 from hearings. And of that 58,000, 14,000 were no offers. And the median decrease was, of all the mediation, was 3%.
Right. Now, 1920, how many total grievances were there?
Grievances or
Total
SCAR petitions?
Total grievances.
200, I think,
About
40, I think.
220, 240?
Yeah, something
Okay.
around that, yeah.
I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not sure. I used to ask ARC on that figure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before my time in her agency, I'm really not sure the number.
But I think it was...
No, actually, I think it's more like 170,000, but they had 90% of the cases receive reductions. Wasn't that it?
I don't think that's the case.
You have to ask ARC. I'm sorry. You have to
Okay.
ask ARC on that one.
I guess what my question, what I'm getting to is, it looks like to me we have about 118,000, if my math is right, 118,000 settlements. Would you agree with that?
Between ARC and SCAR?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe
yeah.
actually less, because, well, are you
No,
considering
he's
the
looking
non-offers?
60 plus 58 plus 82, right?
Well, I'm not including the 82. The 82 were
Okay, so
adjudicated.
yeah, 118. If you just use a plain sad numbers, right?
I don't know if that math.
I'm
Yeah,
having trouble
60,000
doing
plus
that, so.
58.
I'm sorry, we're trying to do math on the fly. It was 60,000 offers. I think the Assessment Review Commission gave 20 or 30,000 zero offers. We gave 14,000 zero offers of the 58,000. So,
Oh, that's
like I said,
true.
it'd be about 38,000 to 40,000 we were saying reductions, plus ARC 60,000 reductions.
Correct, so you
About
minus-
100,000, maybe a little
14,104.
up, maybe a little down, I think.
Yeah, you have to minus out the zero offers that were in there.
Right.
Because they were really just confirming the value.
Right.
So,
Okay, so we had said about 14,000 zero offers, right?
Yes.
14,000 on the SCAR side, we don't know how many on the ARC side.
25% of the mediations were
Zeros.
zero offers.
At SCAR.
At
Yes.
SCAR.
Now, the 60,000 at ARC, those were reductions, correct?
I believe that's the case.
I believe that's the case.
Okay. So then if we say 118,000, but 14,000 of those at SCAR were zeros,
Right,
you're at roughly 104,000
Right.
settlements.
right.
Okay. So it's I just want to make sure I'm saying, so about 40% or more of residential properties that grieve receive settlements, correct?
40, I mean, combining the SCAR with the...
No,
ARC.
not 40, because there's 386,000 parcels.
Well, if
Well,
you're
I'm
talking about
saying
the
the
total
people that
parcel
grieved.
population, it'd be 1/3 of total.
Oh, individuals that grieved?
Well, we have 250,000 grievances
Right.
Right.
and approximately 104,000 settlements where they received a reduction, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is that, I mean, I'm doing this rough off my head,
Yeah,
but it seems to me,
so are
it's
we.
not 50%, but it's
It,
Yeah.
40-ish, right?
right.
And I guess my question is, I mean, I know we're
Yes,
trying to get away
40%.
from mass settlement,
Right.
at what number is that percentage essentially mass settlement light?
Well, none of it was mass settlement, because even with mediation, the offers made were between 0 and whatever, 20%, but the median offer was 3%. So if you look at the percentage offered, even at ARC that settled cases and at SCAR, the vast majority of settlements came in under 5%.
Right.
A lot of them came under 3%, but the vast majority was under 5%. 5% difference in value is really just a difference of opinion. If you brought in 5 appraisers to appraise your house, they come in with 5 values that can vary up 10 plus or minus 10%. So these small changes we view as not really that the values were inaccurate. It's just that a slight change of opinion, 2-3%, is not going to be considered that the assessment was wrong. It's under 5%. Usually the IAO and the IWO consider the assessment to be accurate.
Between 5 and 10%. And one other thing to consider with what you're calling the mass settlement program under the Mangano administration, the reason why individuals received very generous settlements is because of the ratio difference. So we eliminated that issue with the 2020-2021 roll, and when we did the mediation program, we relied on a comparable analysis review. Rather than individuals receiving a settlement because of a ratio dispute or a varied ratio, we relied heavily on the mechanics of and the procedures of assessment and of SCAR. And we used comparable market analysis, multiple models to deliver settlements that we thought were fair, and also made sure that those on the other side understood that we know that the assessment's accurate. So a difference of opinion of 3% is well within the standards of the IAO and IAAO, which is between 5 and 10% for a heterogeneous community like Nassau County.
And also realize that our mediation program was a reflection of decisions coming out from the SCAR hearing. So it's a mechanism to lessen the liability, because we're looking at the exposure of the cases as a result of decisions coming out from SCAR.
The 8,200 that were adjudicated at SCAR, do you have a median percentage decrease?
Yes, between 4 and 5%.
And the 60,000 that were settled at ARC, do you have a percentage decrease?
That one we don't have. You'd have to ask ARC on that. I know at least 20,000 of the cases had less than a 3% offer.
At least how many?
I think 20,000 cases were made offers less than 3%.
Okay, so when we talk about the entire universe of 104,000 reductions at settlement through this process, it's not like the median was 2 to 3% for that 104,000. The median was 2 to 3%, according to what you're saying, for the 40,000 that, I'm sorry, the 58,000 that were settled at SCAR, right?
True.
Right, we don't know what
ARC offered.
Right.
Right, and we don't know and the percentage for those adjudicated was higher.
We have to go through, because the adjudication ones come out in PDF, so you have to go one by one on them, and we have to parse them out, because there were multiple sheets coming in from the court every week.
I actually think
so we have to do a large merge, and we haven't really drilled down on those numbers yet.
The adjudicated should be 5%.
On the median?
Yes.
The median, okay.
On the average, because the average was 5.
I'll have to double check that.
But we'd have to drill down on the number
But
on that,
not-
because
not
we
that-
haven't consolidated yet.
Okay, thank you.
Legislator Drucker, and then Eli.
Thank you, guys. I just have a quick, the numbers are starting to make my head spin a little bit. I just wanted to be clear. 80,000 SCAR petitions, 58,000 were settled. So in my primitive math, that's a 73% of the SCAR petitions were settled.
That's correct.
And of that 73%, 25% of them accepted a 0 offer.
That is correct.
So in my opinion, that really reflects on a pretty accurate roll.
That and the fact that it's only a median decrease of 3%.
Right, so that the median is 3%, with an average of maybe 4%.
Correct.
Again, that speaks pretty well of the accuracy of the roll. And would you be able to say historically that is far different, vastly different from previous years when the settlements were, like you said, much larger with a wink-wink type of thing?
Yes.
Yes.
The average SCAR reduction was 11+% last year for 1920.
And now we're looking at 3% with 25% saying, I'm willing to accept a zero change.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Legislator Millet.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question, and so I just think that that's great that we have such a really accurate roll. If I'm understanding what you're saying, based on what happened in the past with the 11%, and now it's 3% with the total, maybe we're inching up towards 5%, but according to the professional standards, if I'm understanding what you're saying, that brings us into an extremely accurate roll. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then I only have one other question. I'm so tired. For the remaining cases that are going to court, we all know that home prices have really gone up quite a bit because of the whole COVID buying spree. Will that have an impact on the upcoming court cases?
No, because the upcoming court cases are based on prior tax roll of 2021, which were based on sales that were based in 2018.
Okay.
So it has a psychological effect, but on an analytical basis, it will not have an effect because they're not using the current sales.
Okay.
They might have it in their mind that the market is rising and prices are going up, but they will default back to the sales that occurred in 2018.
Thank you very much.
Legislator Rhodes.
I have no questions.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next presentation is the Department of Public Works.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to discuss the proposed 21 budget for both General DPW and the Sewer and Stormwater Authority. First, I want to open to say that the General DPW budget is put together with both managing the fiscal challenges put in front of the county as a result of the COVID emergency, but also ensuring vital department services can be achieved. Even with an overall reduction of 4%, this budget over the last year, I'm confident my team can manage our resources and deliver our services. One only needs to look at the work road and traffic units did in response to the tropical storm, or the work that my facilities management group did during the COVID emergency with all the different items we had to do to get the buildings open to see that we can get this done. As to project delivery, which I know is very important to this body, I'm very confident that we will continue our positive path on moving projects forward. Our engineers and other technical staff that have been able to bring on over the last 3 years have made great strides in understanding the infrastructure and how we put out numerous road, bridges, sewer, and traffic projects. Most importantly is the continued success of our resurfacing program, which I'm hopeful this year will be 170 lane miles for the year. Unfortunately, project delivery over this year and next will be more of a function of capital cash resources than manpower. The current onboard head count is 376 for the department, and we have budgeted for 391. At this time, my largest concern is equipment operators for snow removal. We've been working with OMB to utilize these vacancies towards that cause. Contractual services decrease is mainly a function of the TransDev contract. New York State has indicated to us that the STOA contribution will decrease by 20% in 2021. Additionally, we're projecting a fare box decrease over the year. The department has worked extremely hard with TransDev to ensure that no routes are eliminated. This was achieved by both one of the largest county contributions to the system ever at $12.8 million, and also the adjustment of frequency between buses. One important item to note is the increase of $4 million to my facilities budget for this coming year. This is associated with the work that we need to do for the COVID emergency. As the SSW budget for 2021, it's increasing by $5.2 million or 3%. Salaries continue to drop as case employees leave service. We currently have only 37 case workers remaining, down 12 from last year. The headcount for non-case workers remains unchanged. The major increase in the budget is associated with the Suez contract. This increase is $7.8 million or 12%. The drivers for this include the need to address various items within the contract and to true up long-standing concerns on both sides. These issues, to name a few, include resolving maintenance costs versus capitalized maintenance events and the coming online of various facilities that add additional requirements to Suez. So in conclusion, while this budget is not ideal, it is practical to address the fiscal challenge we face, and most importantly, we can deliver the necessary service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Questions? I just said it already. It's hard to see sometimes.
Hey, Commissioner, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Great. Commissioner, you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, there was a specific title that you indicated they operate the snowplows?
Yes.
What title is that?
Equipment operators, there's two titles, 2s and 3s.
All right. I'm having trouble locating it in my little book here, but what were you budgeted for 2020 for that position?
We're in the high 90s.
And you budgeted for the same amount, less?
Roughly the same amount, so we're looking at attrition and different things have changed to make sure that we're at those levels that we're budgeted for.
And is that the same title that does the landscaping on the county roadways?
For the most part, yes. There are a couple other titles that help with landscaping, but those are integral parts of that title.
Do those other titles that help with landscaping help with snowplow, or do you need a CDL for that?
You need a CDL for the snowplows. During a snow emergency, those other titles could be doing payloader work, or pickup truck, the parking lots, or hand shoveling. They'll be doing other types of work.
All right. And do we currently have a routine schedule for the landscaping of the county roadways, or is it an on-call situation?
We have a rotation. We try to get to every location every 4 weeks, but I don't have a hard schedule because things change all the time. Good example is the tropical storm. You know, we pulled out our units from grass cutting to deal with that storm for a month period that was required to take care of it.
And how about the sumps, the county sewer?
Again, they're treated just as the roadways are. Each garage does a cycle, and we try to get to them every 4 to 5 weeks also.
Yeah. So I remember this came up last year when we were going over the budget for this year, and I know we put in an amendment to increase the number specifically for that title. Unfortunately, it didn't go forward. But do you feel that you can continue on that 4-week schedule with the current employees budgeted in this budget?
That would be our goal, yes. And we did hire quite a bit of equipment operators, but we also lost quite a bit this past year. So we kept the current staffing, but I think we hired around 12 or 15 people in that title. But that same number of people had left.
Okay, but you're not the title is that there are no vacancies in that title, correct? Currently?
Currently, I think I know we have at least 2, because I have 2 people left service. I'm looking at the title series right now and working with OMB to bring it back up to the budget level.
So the 2 vacancies you currently have, are those 2 taken out of this budget? Are they part of those vacant but funded positions?
They're part of the vacant but funded positions.
So then there are 2 less spots for 21 in this budget than you
No. I take that back. No, at the equipment operators, we stayed at the same level that we've always had.
Okay.
We're not down positions for equipment operators, no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Legislator Walker.
Just really a quick question. First of all, I want to thank you for all the help you always give whenever, my office has to call, and I'm sure everybody else would agree. But one of the things we have big issues with are the sumps, and I know you said that they are on a rotating basis, but is there any way that at some point in time that maybe they could really go in and do a massive cleanup in those sumps? My parent, I grew up next to one, and so that's obviously still there. It used to be, they were really very, very well maintained. now most of them are just like so overgrown, and, you know, it's not the county's fault that people throw garbage in it and they, you know, be ridiculous, or just, you know, whatever flies in there and it's left there. But it really becomes an issue with the neighbors, and sometimes, like, if I could climb over the fence myself, I don't know, I guess maybe in my youth I climbed over those fences, but no more. But, you know, you wish you could almost go and clean up yourself. And I know it's not parkland, I know it's not gonna look pristine, but is that something that could possibly be addressed, like, better than it is? Because I feel like every one of us get bombarded with some issues.
I mean, with the current forces I have, we look to cut the grass every 4 to 5 weeks. During the winter, we'll try to do some major basin cleanups where they're really bad. We look to keep the top of berm cut and clean, especially where the homeowners are, you know, can see inside the basins. But to do anything more than that, I really would not have the manpower to get into full cleanups of. I have over 500 basins. I mean, that's a major project in itself.
I know even like throughout the summer, you know, some of them that are by ball fields or whatever, you know, even the issues with mosquitoes or whatever, and
Well,
you know,
that's treated. We would take care of the mosquitoes,
right,
treating,
because I know
larviciding the.
my office calls you often for
Yes,
that, to have
yeah.
to deal with that.
That
but-
we would jump on that right away. That would be a different type of issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Ken. And we have the Department of Minority Affairs.
Good evening, Presiding Officer Nicolao. Good evening, Presiding Officer Nicolao and legislators. I'm joined today by my Deputy Director, Regina Williams. The Office of Minority Affairs, Lionel Chitty. The Office of Minority Affairs has reviewed the 2021 Executive Proposed Budget. OMA understands the budget constraints facing Nassau County and believes this proposed budget provides the staffing levels we need to meet the challenges facing our minority communities. Included in this proposition is the addition of qualified staff, including an attorney that will assist OMA in contract compliance and other important work in connection with issues affecting minority residents and businesses. Improving the state of minority businesses is at the forefront of our 2021 agenda. OMA is preparing to work on its first disparity study in over a decade. This endeavor will involve Suffolk County as well. Involved in this process is in-depth compiling of data to determine the availability, utilization, and future capacity of minority and women-owned business enterprises and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses in Nassau and Suffolk counties. This work will make possible the creation of meaningful contracting goals for our MWBEs and SDVOBs. Our staff will take on the important work of overseeing the disparity study consultant and coordinate activities with other county agencies in this regard. We will also have staffing for enhanced outreach and programs to assist our work in promoting county resources in the areas of health, social services, workforce development, civil rights, and economic opportunity, to name a few. With the proposed staffing additions, OMA stands ready to meet the challenges that lie ahead and improve the lives of the communities we serve. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Just have a general question, and an observation that you and Dr. Williams, Lionel, have done so much work this year in terms of getting minority affairs up and running and active and doing what we should be doing. Does this budget for 2021 allow you to continue to build on that progress?
Absolutely, absolutely. We work directly to make sure that we can meet those needs.
Okay. All right. Question, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer Nicolao. Good evening.
Good evening.
I know it's been a long day, so I'm just going to keep the questions brief. Obviously, Executive Director Chitty, you were present for the Minority Affairs hearing that we had a couple of weeks ago, and at that hearing we discussed some of the things that are being done and some of the things that aren't being done because of staffing and personnel issues within your department that really should be done pursuant to charter. There simply aren't enough bodies to be able to do it. And I observed that today you've come in and just gave your statement saying that you have sufficient staff to be able to meet those challenges. I do note that of particular concern is not just next budget year, but I noticed that for the major fund salary plan for not just 2021 proposed budget, for 2022, for 2023, for 2024, there is absolutely no change in what the county executive sees for the budget for the Office of Minority Affairs. And I don't know how your office is going to be able to continue to move forward without the staff that you need to be able to accomplish the very important and significant goals that your office is charged to accomplish. And I know and I understand your desire to try and do more with less, which is sort of our mantra in government, but you reach a point where it's such a Herculean task that it becomes impossible. And I'm just concerned that with the Office of Minority Affairs, we're at that point. I know, and this really isn't a question, it's more of a statement, I know and appreciate the fact that you've come in here to say that to sort of back up the administration's budget and say that you don't need more staff, but it seems to me that you clearly do. And I would love to find a way to see that happen.
I appreciate the comment, Legislator Rhodes. As you can see, my biggest focus right now is on the 2021 budget. We do have a staffing increase there, including the assistance of an attorney that will help us with that contract compliance, which is a huge portion of what our charter mandates us to do. We will also be looking at a program coordinator to assist us in other items, specifically with the certification processes and also with specific outreach. Dr. Williams, would you like to add anything to that? As I said, that we're specifically looking at the 2021 budget. I'm not aware of anything further than that as far as my office is concerned.
Yeah, I'm just looking at I'm looking at the summary, and I see no change in terms of the Office of Minority Affairs overall budget for the next 4 years.
Well,
it seems as though, based on the hearings, that you probably needed about 12 or 13 staff people total, and I see that it's increasing from 7 to 8, but it's to my mind woefully inadequate for what you're charged to do and what your office needs to do in order to be fully functional.
Okay. Well, you also do
again,
have
my opinion.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Always valued. We do have some part-time positions that are also included within there, but I understand where you're coming from, and we will be working directly with budget as any other challenges become our forefront, and we will work directly with them to make sure that we can fill our specific needs with our charter.
Thank you, Mr. Chitty.
Okay, anyone else? Legislator Salage? We can't hear you right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. No, just usually this late in the hearing, when Legislator Rhodes has a long question, I usually start to pull my hair. But I'm very glad to ask that question, and I asked the same exact question that he asked, and I thank the Executive Director, Mr. Lionel City, for his answer. But I thank Legislator Rhodes also for that question, and I agree with his same concerns and sentiments. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other legislators? Good. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience. I know it's been a long night.
Thank you. Good evening.
Last but certainly not least is the Department of Health. Dr. Eisenstein, before you even start, I want to thank you for all that you have done through this pandemic. You were an invaluable resource to us. You did an extraordinary job. Your daily briefings, which we shared with all of our residents, and not only did they a benefit to us, but for many, many residents in this county, the information that you shared with us, the level-headed approach that you shared with us, I think truly helped a tremendous amount of people in this pandemic. So, a job well done. You deserve a lot of credit for all that you did, and you're continuing to do.
Thank you, Presiding Officer Nicolello, and good evening to you and to all the members of the legislature. Good to see you here tonight. It's been some stretch for all of us, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with many of you individually and as a group, and I just want to quickly introduce the team that I have here with me tonight. Shelley Schechter, our Director of Maternal Child Health, should there be any questions regarding early intervention and preschool. She's been running the program for many, many years. Jerry Giuliano, our Public Health Attorney. Deneen Jenkins, our Fiscal Director, and Mary Ellen Lorraine, everybody's favorite press officer and legislative liaison. And I want to thank you for the kind words, Legislator Nicolello, but I also want to share that the Health Department, from the first call that we got on Super Bowl Sunday, February 2nd, when the first traveler who was going to need to be quarantined, when that first call came in, it's been around the clock for our team since that date, February 2nd. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And the team has done an amazing job. And I am very lucky to have the position I'm in because the leaders in the Department of Health, they don't complain. This is why you have a public health department. We in public health train for these scenarios. We pray they never happen. I get asked frequently, am I totally surprised? Well, we're surprised because historically you haven't seen something this dramatic, but we know this can happen, and the health department has responded incredibly well. We're taking, our call center continues to operate. We're assisting our schools at an unprecedented level, and we've created direct lines for school administrators and separately for school medical personnel, and so we're very proud. And I stand before you at this legislative hearing happy to say that this budget gives us what we've requested. And there's a point in it that it points out that our 2021 budget has a head count that's equivalent to an increase of 25 head count, which brings us to the historical level of 18. That's what we requested because that's what we felt that we needed to accomplish this and all the public health work that we're going to continue to do long after COVID is done. And so I'm very grateful when I've needed resources throughout all of this. I've received the resources I've needed. We have been helped out by the budget office, by the administration, and all of this has come together very well. The contact tracing program is working very well. We have a good relationship with them. We have received grant from the state to help us with disease investigation, and the staff has just, for the most part, done a spectacular job. And so I'll save the time for any questions that you might have, but I'm very proud of how the health department is done, and I'm very comfortable with the budget that's being presented to you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the legislators? Legislator Reggie Whitten.
Hi, Dr.
Hi.
Isaac. God forbid we get a second wave. Do you feel that our hospitals are prepared with PPEs, and do you think there's enough tests in Nassau County that will be ready?
Yes, and we're lucky to be in Nassau County, and quite frankly, while testing capacity was a problem in many places in the country and in the state, we did pretty well from the beginning with testing capacity. We have an incredible healthcare infrastructure. Our hospital systems are the best in the world. Many of them have their own laboratories, and Northwell, for example, was up in testing within a couple of days of this starting. We have had, the Jones Beach testing site was open very quickly. The Federally Qualified Health Center was a great partner in helping us reach populations that needed an extra boost to be able to access care if they couldn't get to Jones Beach or Northwell, and they became a partner, set up tents for us that we did excellent testing. And so throughout all of this in Nassau County, and I'm on calls with all the other county health departments and their commissioners and the directors and the state health department, and I hear the stories where there's no place to get testing within 50 miles or 80 miles or whatever it is. We didn't have that, and I think that our hospitals were as well prepared as any could be anywhere, and now we're all these months of experience and knowledge into it. So I hope we won't see a second wave the way we fear it. I think that as we move inside, you might see numbers creep up, but that's very different than getting to anything remotely close to what hit us back in March and April, and I hope that we're smart enough now to avoid that, and our hospitals are prepared.
Anyone else? Legislator Walker and Schaefer.
I first just want to thank you, too, for all you did for all the residents of Nassau County, and certainly for all of us. And, you know, sometimes you had to field questions that didn't necessarily strictly pertain to you, but you were kind of our contact and our go-to person. So, you know, you always listened, and you always, you know, gave us the best answer you could. But just being there to listen to every one of us and giving us advice for all our residents, you took phone messages, text messages, and whatever, and you tried to get back to each and every one of us as soon as you possibly could, which was really such a benefit to all our residents. I thank you for that. And my question really is in regard to our early intervention services, that you know, expenses are going up there. Are we concerned that we might not have the money budgeted for all those, you know, expenses that we have to occur with our early intervention? And I'm concerned that now we could even have additional expenses if more people come to light, especially after this whole COVID crisis.
Yes, so the early intervention and preschool programs, which fall under the Division of Maternal Child Health, there are different programs for different ages. So the early intervention program is from 0 to 3, and the preschool program is up to 5. And that is where you're seeing the big jump in preschool. Early intervention, the costs are actually going down. It's preschool where the costs are gone up. And we've done an analysis of that. We understand why it is. There are more children being served. That's part of it. But the other part is that the program in the last few years has shifted dramatically to what we call center-based programs, which are all-day intensive programs, which run about double what the former programs used to be. So on average, the program runs about $45,000 to $47,000 a year per child, whereas what they used to get, which was partial day service or whatever, was $18,000 to $20,000. This has been a shift that's been seen all around the state. So we understand why the costs have gone up. To answer your question, we think that there's definitely the opportunity. All the counties are dealing with this. This is a statewide problem, and there's definitely an opportunity for cost savings. We've learned some things during this. We've learned that some treatments, not all of them, but some therapies can happen via telehealth. You see the costs for transportation. Just transportation alone is millions of dollars. We think that there are opportunities for savings. Chief Deputy County Executive has asked for a task force to be put together to advocate for savings and legislation, and I think there's an appetite for that because these programs, and the preschool program alone runs over $100 million of our budget. Every county's dealing with it. So I think that we recognize that it's going up. We've worked with the budget office. The budget that we've asked for is what we consider to be the fiscal worst case scenario. So it's possible that there won't be 365 days of in-person school, but even if there is, the budget that we have is meant to cover that, with the understanding that we think there's an opportunity for reworking some of the programs and never to deny services. It's the most important thing to ensure that our children are served, but we think that there's ways to bring the costs down.
Well, I thank you for that, and I thank you for all that we do for our early intervention, our younger ones, and our preschool, because I know many people who have children with special needs, and once they've come out of our services here with that, their children really are not getting the services that they need throughout COVID, and even now that kids are back in school. So, you know, students that had 5 days a week in school now have 2, and you know, it's very, very, and your heart breaks for them because you know, it's hard enough when you have a child without special needs, but when you have a child that needs all these services that aren't getting them. So I thank you so much for all you're doing for at least our little ones.
Thank you. And Shelley Schechter is one of the strongest advocates for the programs and for the children who have special needs. So they have a strong advocate leading the charge in our department.
Well, I thank you, Shelley, and I thank every one of you for, for all you've done throughout COVID and what you do for us always. So thank you.
Legislator Schaefer and then Legislator Ferretti.
Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Just have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
I noticed a couple of payroll-related changes, and I'm wondering if that's probably similar to some of the other departments I questioned, and maybe that it's contract, being considered contract increases. So I'll just throw out to you, there were some seasonal positions for public health aides, too. And it looked like to me that the staffing would still remain at 19, but the salaries increased from 119 to 380. Do you know if that's just OMB changes based on contracts anticipated?
Hi, Denise Jenkins, I'm the fiscal director. Yes, I think part of it is OMB seasonal staying on longer than December. They were supposed to end in the summer, but they're staying on to help.
So the seasonal programs, we have some seasonal jobs that we do during the summer because we have extra work that we do in the summer. It's our busy time, like mosquito collection, et cetera. We felt that we needed the help in responding to COVID and got permission to extend them. So that's part of it.
Okay. Another one which may be similar is, although it's not seasonal, Public Health Nurse 1. There was a change for that as well. There were about 2 heads that were at $141,000 each for 2020 and 5 at $446,000 for 2021, which comes to an approximate increase of $20,000 per head. Does that sound about right for some sort of salary increase? Is it contractual?
Yes. There's an increase for...
Okay, those are also like CSE employees or the union? Okay, okay. And then just one other question I had relative to license and permit fees.
Yeah.
So the year-to-date for August, or up to August of 2020, was approximately like 3.8 million annualized, and if you went for through the rest of the year, that would work out to probably about 5.6 million. So I see that you only projected for like 4.6. Is that because of COVID? Were there less inspections, or are there less people getting their permits renewed? If you could just clarify what that's about.
It's a bunch of factors.
Yeah.
There aren't less inspections. If anything, there are more inspections, but they're different. They're geared more towards COVID compliance. We had a lot of restaurants that were closed for an extended period of time, and a lot of our people who would do inspections, we had one of the things that our department did really well was prioritize, and our staff was so flexible, and so inspectors, when restaurants were closed, were serving the role of doing quarantine checks and that kind of thing, and there's no revenue in that, but it's required work. So that is part of it. Not all the restaurants survive, unfortunately. We projected that. We hope many of them will come back. And I think that the projection is reasonable based on, the underlying circumstances.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking also just because things were shut down for several months, so there was. Okay. Okay. That's all that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Ferretti.
Thank you, Rich. My question actually was already covered, but I do want to just thank you, Dr. Eisenstein, for you and your team. You really did an exceptional job.
Thank you.
Always being there to answer the phone, working 24 hours a day. It really was recognized, I'm sure, by all of us up here. So thank you all for what you did. And I see Jerry Giuliano back there, and I haven't had the opportunity to meet him yet. I've spoken to him on the phone over the last decade, probably a handful of times, and he's always been very helpful. So really, God bless all of you, and thank you.
I'm very lucky to have Jerry. He's the best. Thank you.
Okay. Any other legislators? We're all good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And
be well.
Close the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are your hands? You okay?
Thank you.
Aye.